Hey there, booktube, welcome back to my channel. It is February 6th. I'm just getting around to making my January recap video, and I guess it's apropos that I'm just doing this on the 6th of the month because I only read 5 or 6 books in January. A lot less than what I had expected, a lot less than what I intended, because at the beginning of January I created what I called my 10 book TBR because I said I'm going to give myself room to read the 10 books that I'm expecting to read on average each month, and if I finish all those books, then I have freedom to add more books to my reading list. But I didn't even read those 10 books, and some of the books that I read weren't even on that list. So at the end of the first month in 2020, I've already failed with sticking to my own reading plans, but it's fine. The month just kind of got away from me. You know, you start the new year thinking about all the things that you didn't do last year and making plans for all the things that you plan to do this year, and then before you know it, a couple of weeks have gone by and you haven't really read much. So at the end of the month, I only finished 5 books. I'm still in the process of reading several other books, and I was kind of hoping that by the time I made this video, I would have finished some additional books and I'd be able to talk to you about them, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stress myself to say that I have to finish a book on some kind of a schedule. I didn't finish the book at the end of January. This video is about the books that I finished in January, so we're just going to keep it at that. So 5 books finished in January. I'm going to tell you a little bit of something about them. A little bit of something. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them just as a way of looking back. You know, I also use these videos for my own tracking. Every now and then I need some information and I can refer to a YouTube video for information on what happened at some previous time in my life. So that's good. And the baby is here, of course, because I started making this video a few times, yesterday and today. And every time I would start to film, she would start to yell. And while I know a few of you like to hear her cooing in the background, as do I, it's not so easy to talk above her yelling. But we're here together. We're gonna film this video. We're just gonna talk about a few books, so this video is not gonna be long. The first book that I started in January, I'm still reading, and that is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. It's taking me a long time to read that book. I've tried, and I'm still in the process of using 3 different formats of reading that book. I have the print version from my TBR shelves, and I got both the audiobook and an ebook downloaded from my library, and I'm alternating between all 3 of those things because it's hard to keep the print book in my hand, especially when I have her around. But I also don't want to have electronics around all the time I'm with her. So I'm using all 3 versions intermittently, but it's a 500 plus page book and I'm really enjoying it. But at first I was kind of starting to zone out and lose where I was in the book. So I've read sections of that book several times, but I'm still not finished. So that was the book that I'd asked you guys to choose as the first book that I read in 2020, but I had to kind of put it aside and read other things just because it was taking me so long. It's possible that if I had just stuck with Life After Life, that this would have been a one book TBR, a 1 book January recap. So I'm glad that I kind of put it aside. Not that I've stopped reading it, I'm still actively reading it, but I just didn't finish it. So the first book that I finished was something else, and that is Olive Again by Elizabeth Strout, and that is the continuation of Olive Kitteridge, which was Elizabeth Strout's Pulitzer Prize winning novel, which is a novel told through interconnected short stories. And I love the format. I love the fact that she used this format again to continue the story in this sequel. And if you're unfamiliar, Olive Kitteridge is an older woman living in Maine. She has an adult son, and she had a very interesting marriage. We met that part of her family in the first book. Olive Again is a return to her story. It is told, like I said, in the same format where we know some things about Olive's character through her interactions with her neighbors, through the things that they say about her, both when they're with her and when they're by themselves. So Olive's character is revealed to us through other people, as well as we have chapters or stories that follow Olive's ramblings as well. But I love the fact that this is a woman who may be described as crotchety. She's definitely set in her ways, or at least she appears to be. She seems to be a little bit nonchalant about other people's feelings, in that she's one of those people who kind of tells it like it is, and bully for you if you don't like it. But it is exactly this type of character, someone who doesn't care as much what people think about her or say about her. Is that kind of a person who you want to meet when you're looking for a stranger to be kind? That saying, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. Olive Kitteridge is one of those people who you would want to meet as a stranger when you're in need, because she doesn't care what other people will say. She's gonna do what she considers to be the right thing. And one of my favorite scenes or anecdotes from the book is where she's almost forcing herself to attend a baby shower for a young woman, and while she's there, she sees another woman who's in advanced pregnancy, and she sees this young woman going to labor, and no one else notices. As a matter of fact, this pregnant woman, she goes through great lengths to hide the fact that she's struggling. She wants to hide it from other people because she doesn't want to mess up this other woman's shower and party. And because Olive is perceptive, she doesn't care what people say, she's the one who rescues this woman and delivers her baby. I mean, that's not quite a spoiler. It is just one thing that happens in the book. But I use this to say that Elizabeth Strout captures so well relationships, intimacy, the kind of personality and character that borders on off-putting, but also is, her warmth just kind of bowls you over. The remarks that she makes and the connections that she makes with other people, it's just, it's such an intimate look at life through the perspective of a woman who's getting older, and seeing some of the things that she may have wanted to do, some of the things that she wanted to accomplish in her life, not really work out the way she had wanted, but having the strength to try again. I just absolutely love Olive Kitteridge's character, and I love how Strout reveals her through all these many people that we meet. Some who are likable, some who are not, some who are reliable, some who have their own ulterior motives, but it gives us this very multifaceted look at who a person is and how life is viewed differently from through so many different lenses. So that was the first book that I finished, because once I'd started it, I didn't want to put it down. And I read that as an electronic copy, an ebook, Kindle download from my library. The second book that I finished, I think, was Sulwe, which I read with the baby. We got a print copy, and I have that right here, so I'll actually take it up. For this video, and for most of my videos going forward, I'm probably not going to have a book to hold up because baby's always in hand. But this was a delightful picture book that I got as a gift. Well, we got for the baby, but I absolutely loved reading it with her. And this is written by Lupita Nyong'o. Shh, go back to sleep. This is a picture book that's written by Lupita Nyong'o and illustrated by Vashti Harrison. And I've showed you a picture or pictures of this book in my Friday Reads video, but I'll show you again because I just love the way the storyboard is set up in this book. I think that's the page I showed you before, so I'm going to show you a different page now. Look at this. I love how the illustrator uses the full double page to tell this story. It's just beautiful. It's about a little girl who is uncomfortable with her appearance because she has the darkest skin in her family, and when she's being teased by other people, for her skin color, she doesn't really have a frame of reference because she's the darkest person almost that she knows. And I love the story. Lupita Nyong'o is exactly the kind of person who we want to see tell this story, because she, as a dark-skinned woman, rose to success because of her skin color. Some of the characters that she has probably been able to play might have been because of her dark skin. And so I love the story that's implicit in this book, which is that the world might not change, but you have to change in your perception of it. You have to change in your relationship to it. Even though there is a magical element to the book, instead of her magically becoming lighter or magically exchanging places with someone else, nothing changes on the outside, but she has to become herself. She has to become her own biggest supporter. And so it's all about learning to love yourself, learning to appreciate yourself, learning to be comfortable in your own skin, whatever that skin looks like. And so I love the story, love the illustrations, and it's a book that I want to recommend just to everyone, to every young girl, but also to every older woman, and maybe every young boy and every older man, because insecurities plague many of us. Sometimes we hear about it, sometimes we don't. And this may be just the book that would help someone who has been struggling silently with their own appearance, and we'd never know. So that's the second book that I finished in January. Then I read The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, which is another book that kind of bowled me over with its tenderness and how it spoke about relationships between family members. This one is narrated by a man. Even though it's a story about women, lots of women, lots of female relatives. So this man, he speaks about his relationship with his sister, about the mother who abandoned them, about the stepmother and stepsisters that they inherited and who essentially stole their lives, but also the women who were paid to look after them and who ended up becoming their family. It's a book about the family we choose and the family who should choose us but don't. It's also a book about spaces, the spaces that we inhabit, and how we find home, and sometimes in unlikely buildings. Because the Dutch house, which is the center of this book and the title, this should be the main character in this book, it's a book that alternates between providing refuge and being the thing that eludes us or excludes us. Patchett in this book gives us a quiet study of the role of women, how women are viewed in their roles, both by themselves, by other women, and by the men in their lives. And it also talks a lot about family legacy and how we become our parents even when we are trying to do otherwise or trying to escape the legacy that we would inherit from them. I just love the way Patchett explored these themes and gave us this look at what family is, what family does to us, the impact of family over the generations, whether that is, like I said, our biological family or the family that we have chosen or the family that has chosen us. Loved The Dutch House. When I was reading it, I thought I was going to give it a 4-star rating, but I'm thinking more and more about the writing, and I may bump that rating up even more. This was another electronic download from my library. I read a Kindle version on my phone. Then I read The Wives by Taryn Fisher, which was the book club pick for the patrons for Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany's online book club for her patrons. And we all chose this book, so I'm not blaming anyone, but I didn't like it. The genre is supposed to be domestic thriller, I suppose, but it's one of those books that doesn't quite meet the genre just because it doesn't quite do what you expect it to. The premise is that we have a woman who's married to a man and sharing him with 2 other wives who she hasn't met and becomes increasingly more curious about. And it is in her trying to discover more things about the life that her husband has when he's not with her and the women that he shares his life with. It seems like this book is going to be about polygamy, polyamorous relationships, and the impact that it has on women. But it took a turn. The twists that I'm not even sure that I could call plot twists, because they're just, I didn't like that book, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. But I was disappointed because I thought that the author gave us a very interesting setup, and I could see where she could have done a lot more diving into some themes that might have been interesting to me to explore. Like the fact that the book is titled The Wives, and she gave us very different iterations of that kind of a character. So we met several women who were wives, and we learned a little something about each one of their relationships. So it seemed like we were going to be comparing the role of a woman in a marriage, different women from different cultural backgrounds, different age groups, and very different socioeconomic standards. That would have been interesting to me. But again, how the book resolved, I didn't like it. So not going to say anything more about that one. Just, it was very disappointing to me, and I'm glad that I didn't have my own copy, because if that was a book that I had bought, I would have given it away. But I read another Kindle download from my library. And then the last book that I finished in January was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which was not on my TBR, but I was on a waiting list from the library, another ebook download, and it came in, so I wanted to read it, and I read it quite quickly. The story is based on a real-life juvenile center and reform school that existed in Florida, I think, in the middle of the 1900s. And what Colson Whitehead tried to do with this book is to shine a light on the horrors that the young men who were sent to this facility, what they endured, which included but were not limited to bullying from fellow students and capital punishment inflicted by their superiors, and sometimes physical exploitation to the point of death. The story is told through a main character who's a young boy growing up in the South in the early to mid 1900s, and we see him experience a lot of the hardships that we expect just from that setup. So in his external life, he is subject to prejudice and racism, and at home he's been abandoned by the people who should have been there to support his life and to foster and fuel his dreams. But through all of that, we see him develop ambitions, and just at the point where he's on the brink of moving forward into claiming that place that he wants to inhabit in society, he becomes victimized again, and he's sent to this reform school. And it's following his existence, I don't want to call it his life, but through following what happens to him in this reform school, that the story is told. And it was just heartbreaking to read from this young man's perspective what he endured, and also what he was able to escape one way or another. It was a very difficult book to read. There were moments where I had to put that book down physically. I wasn't reading a physical copy, I was reading a Kindle download, but there were points where I had to just abandon the book and do something, hold the baby and look at her so that I wouldn't just fall apart. Ultimately, the book was a little bit unsatisfying because of the ending. There is a little bit of a twist in the end, one that I didn't see coming. And so that just accounted for me not feeling great at the end of the book. But I really enjoyed, I shouldn't say enjoyed, I really appreciated Colson Whitehead exploring the story and fictionalizing it so that, you know, what should have been a human rights horror and a real story of how we failed so many people from our society. I appreciated the fact that he highlighted it in this book, fictionalized it, so it made it maybe a little bit more palatable to read, but also to bring awareness to something that is a real part of our history and that we should know about. So those are the 5 books that I finished in January, all the other books that were on my TBR, and all the other books that I've added to my TBR since then. Those are all carried over to my February reading, so let's see if I can do better with my reading in February. And even if I don't, it's okay. If I only read 5 more books in February, it just means that my March TBR will be longer, but I'm still okay. If it means that I haven't been reading much because I'm spending more time with the little one, that's fine by me. There's still a lot of year to catch up with reading goals. So for now, I'd love to chat with you in the comments down below if you've read any of these books, you want to talk about them, if you had some different thoughts when you were reading those books, something I might have missed that you want to share with me. Then give me a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more, and let's talk down there. So until next time, happy reading. Bye.